everybody. This is everything but the words. It is a props and movement class on performance. And let's go ahead and get started, all of y'all. Yay! So I am the Honorable Filidh, Siobhán, and Einigh of Connacht, and today we are going to talk about using props and movement in your performances. And please note that performances don't just have to be bardic performances. Anytime you are standing up in front of people and talking or communicating in some way, you are doing a performance. Me teaching this class is a performance, including script. I wrote this class especially with an eye to those of us who have required props as mobility aids and wish to incorporate them in the performance. But these concepts transfer over just as well to other physical items and spaces. A general disclaimer to those of you who may be newer here. Hello!
Am I too late?
You are not too late. You're just getting into my opening spiel.
We have started recording.
Yes. So anyway, general disclaimer to anyone who is newer here. By no means do you need to use your accessibility aids as a prop in your performance. It is 100% fine for your aids to just exist doing their job. For example, you will never see me taking off my glasses. They are only a medical device. I don't play around with them because without them I can't see. The default for any of you who are new is to assume that any accessibility aid that you might need is invisible. You don't need to dress it up. You don't necessarily need to make it look more period just because. However, if you would like to incorporate them, if you would like to dress them up, I'm going to give you some tips and tricks to help bring it into your performance and take it from the invisible to the visible to help it advance the performance. I'm going to pause here for a moment because we have a couple people joining. Master Alexander, are you joining the class?
I thought I was coming to everything with the words.
That is this class.
In that case, yes.
Excellent. Let me actually get you and Hilla a little piece of paper. I'm actually going to go ahead and set these little pieces of paper here.
I apologize. I took us all the way till 3 o'clock.
Oh no, it's the hard.
Thank you.
You're going to put little pieces of paper right there so that they are there.
Sorry?
What's your last name?
See. SDA.
S-E-A-T-O-A. You missed the intro spiel, but I'm basically explaining myself and discussing what this class is about. Okay, we have another person running. No, you're fine, you're fine. Hey, that's going. Master Alexander, would you mind handing our newcomer a piece of paper?
No, we're not. Here you go.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And we have at least a couple of people also joining us on Zoom, so I'll be cross-attentioning. 3 counts as a couple. So yes, sum up what I've said so far. Hi, I'm Siobhán and Einigh of Connacht. I'm teaching this class. And then a little bit about me. Who is this person standing before you, and why do I think I am qualified to teach this? Why should you listen to me? So mundanely, as an FYI, also for those of you who weren't here, the inspiration for this class was specifically using mobility aids or other memory tools within your performance. So mundanely, I am neurodivergent, ADHD, and autistic. This presents in my performance especially with swaying stems, challenges while performing standing still, and memory challenges that have gotten worse with time. This is why I am on script, because this late in the day, I know I am going to need it. One of the key reasons I thought to teach this class was in fact due to discussions that happened regarding bardic books and memory aids in performance spaces. I also do live with chronic pain that intermittently flares to the point that this bardic staff goes from being a nice prop to a very necessary pain relief. I'm about halfway there right now. The earlier in the day it is, the better off I am, but later on it's a pain saver. So you'll usually see this with me. On the performance side, I've been performing in one capacity or another since I was about 5 years old, 30 mumble years ago, with instruments, dance, plays, musicals, choirs, solo singing, performance spaces, large and small, intimate and grand. I say this all just to give you an idea of the breadth of experience that I bring and why you might want to listen. Okay, so performance and movement. I'm going to start with me nattering at you guys for a while. Feel free to take notes if you want to take notes. Don't take notes if you don't want to take notes. I gave you a reminder outline. It's an outline of the class. It doesn't fill in the details. So this class is set up kind of in a Socratic type method. I'm going to ask a lot of questions. I can't answer a lot of them. But there are things for you to consider and to think about in your performance to help drive your creative ideas. Okay, so enough about that. Let's get on to the content. I'm about to teach you the entire class while standing on one foot. I'm Jewish. This is a thing my people do. There's a story about teaching the entirety of Torah while standing on one foot. It's a thing. Ahem. Are you ready?
Yes.
Be intentional and practice. That's it. That's the summary of this entire class. Thank you. You've all been a great class. No, seriously. Be intentional in your actions and your movements and practice them as much as you are able in advance of your performance. Ideally until you don't even need to think about what you are doing. If you bring a movement or an item into a scene and you want it to do stuff, you need to do it in a purposeful manner. Please note that this doesn't mean that it needs to be a big role or a movement. Small movements can be just as purposeful. You never want to leave an audience guessing on whether they should ignore what you're doing or whether it is a part of your act that should be paid attention to. You want to make it easy for the audience to understand your intentions and the role this thing or your movements play within the performance, because the more they have to guess, the more it's going to draw their energy and their attention away from the performance, which will make the performance less strong to the audience, even if they don't realize why that is, even if they can't explain it. Practice. The best fighters go to practice whenever they are able to. I do rapier amongst all my other things, and I spend many, many, many Tuesdays practicing the same 2 atajos and the same 4 general movements over and over and over and over and over and over and over, so that when someone gives me the opening, I can execute one of those movements without thinking. So too do performers need to practice their performances in advance. Even improv performers have to practice improv to get more fluid and more comfortable in their spontaneity. Talk to Master John Inchingham the Fool if you would like to know more about this. He does teach a class on improv that I highly recommend attending if you're going to be performing in any capacity, and again, I'm using performing in a very broad sense. If you're going to be standing in front of people, improv is your friend. There are some very, very rare individuals who are able to just stand up, improv anything straight from the get-go, no practice. But for the vast majority of people, the practice and the preparation are what make the performance. And those experienced performers, like Hilla or like Master Alexander, who seem like they can just get up and perform without doing any preparation at all, they have. It's their years and years of experience that is standing in for that practice. You can practice on stage in front of your audience, which I don't like risking, or you can practice and prepare in advance. It's your choice. Okay, so this is a great summary, but what does it mean to be intentional in a practice? It means to consider everything about your performance from the smallest to the largest aspects that you can, and to take that into account in your planning about your piece. The more you plan in advance, the more you will likely to be comfortable while performing in the moment. My flow for neurodivergence does quite well with checklists. So I'm going to give you one here, which is the one I handed out to you guys, which we're going to go through one at a time. I do apologize for those of you watching via Zoom. I'll be discussing these verbally, and at some point I will get a link so that it can be added to the thing. These are things to consider as far in advance of your performance as you feel comfortable with. For me personally, I start planning them in conjunction with my very first writing, researching, and rehearsing a piece. The idea here is to give you a framework with which to approach adding a movement or props in 5 parts. Look to the item. Look to the space you are in. Look to the piece you are performing. Look to the people around you, and look to yourself. We're going to look at each of these in turn, and I'm going to give you a number of questions, Socratic method again, that you can ask yourself about them to give you an idea of some of the things to consider. Again, I can't answer these for you. Each performer, each performance is going to be different for each of these items. I may note some common scenarios, but ultimately it's going to be up to you to consider them and to make the final decisions on how you will act on them. These questions can act as a framework to prepare in advance. Another general caveat is that as much as you prepare, sometimes the day of you have to change what you're performing for any number of reasons. And that's okay. I do still think working through these exercises is very beneficial. It'll help you with the moving pieces so that if items do need to change the day of, you may have already either thought of an alternate scenario or already have some of the building blocks in place that you can relatively simply pivot to. I'm going to give a moment at the end of each section to let you ask questions and clarify anything I might have said that would have been confusing. So hold your questions until those moments, please. And at those moments, I'm not so much looking for questions like, well, how do I move a thing and row my boat, but more conceptual questions. Hold all, how do I do a thing and row my boat, to the very end of the class. Okay? Excellent. So, look to the item. Consider the item by itself while you're looking for it. This can be any physical thing you are interacting with in your performance. A staff, a cane, a walker, a book, may I have Mr. Bartholomew there, puppet, or emotional support item, even your hand or your foot. Remember, you don't have to use these things in your performance, but if you decide you're going to, these are some things to consider. Does the item look like it should be in your performance? Does it look like it's something the audience should be paying attention to? If not, do you want to change that? Do you want to explain it? It's fine if the answers are no, but you do want to think these things through. If you decide you want to explain it, be sure to tie this into the piece itself, and we'll get to that in a moment. A prime example of this is the Bardic book. Bardic book, a lot of us have them. If you want to gesture with it, say as a way of emphasizing a point, it might help to make it look a little bit more period. That way, it'll go from the audience thinking, oh, I'm going to ignore this piece of modernity, to, oh, hey, this is a prop. It's fine if you can't, but it does add a little extra to the performance. Next, consider how you can move the item in space comfortably for you. Can you toss it? Can you juggle it? Can you tap it on the ground or against nearby objects? Can you gesture with it for emphasis? Do these motions change depending on the space that you are in? The answer to that is yes. Can you lean against it to establish a mood? Is the item another character in your performance? Or is it just a prop or a means of getting out excess energy that you may have? If it's a character, what is its backstory? How can you think to interact with it in ways that add to the piece that you are trying to tell without overwhelming your audience? Play around with it and see what you like best. Get comfortable with the motions you want to use and practice them. If we were in a larger space, I'd show you some of the staff things that I have practiced with, but ceiling's a little low and our quarters are a little bit tight, so we're not going to do that. I do want to add a general note here on books and reading devices, as they are common items we see in performances. Even if you're not using your book as a prop in particular, these tips will help improve your performance while using a book or a reading device. If possible, you'll want to hold your book as flat as possible and as far away from your mouth as possible, so that it's not blocking the sound that's coming out of your mouth, and so that it's down away from your face so that your audience can see your face. Increase the font size until you are easily able to do this. I will note there are a very few songwriters that do not want you to increase the font size of their pieces. They want them to be done by memory, and that is their right to request. My advice personally is, if you can't read it at that font size, just don't include it in your piece. Just don't include that in your repertoire. If they do have such a request, they will put it in their online lyrics when you look it up. And as well, if possible, you do want to try, assuming you do that.
Sorry, I'm like.
I saw you laughing. If possible, you also want to try not to have your book replace your practice. You do want to be as familiar with your text as possible, and not just be reading cold for the first time when you go to your performance. Then you can still put the energy and focus that you need to into the whole performance and not just your word input and output. You may find with time that you don't even need the entirety written out. For example, I tend to mix up verses when nervous. Again, memory challenges, and they get worse later in the day. So if I do have to go bookless for the rules of a particular competition, but I can have some small thing. I'll put the first word of each verse on a note card that I can stick in my palm, or just even on my palm itself if it's allowed, so I can check the order. Or some people will use knots on a string as a physical mnemonic device. So that there are ways to work with that on that side. So do you have any questions on items in a general sense at this time? Yes?
Can I make an addendum to one thing?
The addendum is accepted.
If you are using an electronic book, make sure that it is on and that the screen does not turn off. So the settings are such that the screen does not turn off in the middle of singing a kingdom song for the royals of the visiting kingdom and you've forgotten the words. Don't ask me how I know how that happens.
It is also quite useful if you're using an electronic device to check the brightness of your device before you go into the Bardic Circle. There is nothing more uncomfortable than going to look at your device and suddenly you are blasting the 5,000 suns into the eyes of your neighbors. Keep your brightness down. If you can.
I just figured I'd make
it's a very
commentary.
good point. Okay, so moving on to our next section, the space. Look to the space that you are performing in. Be aware of the space. There is a small possibility that you won't be able to see the space you're performing in until the last minute, but if you are able to, try and at least take a look at it in advance. If you're like me and you can get a bit nervous, spending time in the space can help with jitters quite a bit. And one way to do this, if the space is otherwise closed, if you are physically able to, is to volunteer to help with setup or other activities that are in the space before the time of your performance. That way you get to know it in a more neutral sense. Some things to ask yourself. What are the acoustics of the space? How does it sound if you are speaking in performance voice versus if you are speaking very, very quietly and precisely? Is it a large and grand space? Is it more like this, where it's small and intimate, where a large sound might overwhelm the people that you are speaking with? What materials is it made out of? Not just the walls, but the floor and the ceilings as well. The shape and the material of the ceiling can alter the sound to an impressive extent, as can the floor. If you are going to have a staff and use it as a percussive device, it's a good idea to check what the floor is made out of to make certain that this is going to work. If you're in the mud at Penzic, you might not be able to get an audible sound no matter how hard you slam down that stick into the mud. In that case, it might be useful to carry a block with you so that you can set that down and slam into that instead. If you're on a wooden stage, you might get a wonderfully resonant sound with just a light tap. If you're on tile, you need to be careful because tile damages relatively easily. So, you know, don't slam it down into tile, just tap it like I did. It helps if you're able to tap the floor as you walk up. If it's a thing that you walk with, just walking with it will give you a sense of how it sounds in different ways as you hold it on the floor. So even if you haven't got a chance to hear the space earlier, at the very least, from the time they say, oh, Thora, you're up next, to the time you get into the performance space, you can get an idea of what things sound like. Other things to consider. What is the shape of the room? Listen to any heralds or any people who just talks loudly. Are they easily heard? Are their words swallowed by the space? There's some places I will not perform because I know, and I'm a loud person, I'm a herald. There are some places that I just can't be heard because it just gets swallowed. Are there any dead spots that you might want to avoid aiming your performance at? A dead spot being a space where when the sound hits it, it gets swallowed instead of being absorbed. Fabric is particularly bad for this. It'll take that sound and it'll just eat it right up instead of bouncing it back out into the room. What does the layout look like, and how might you be able to move around it? Can you move at all? In this space here, for example, if I wanted to do a piece, I'm pretty much limited to pacing back and forth horizontally here. I can move forward back a little bit, but I've got our wonderful guests on Zoom to consider. If I get too close, I might be out of focus. If I move too far back, the same problem. It's not that I can't move, but do I want to move? Do you have places to put your items? At the very least, a water bottle or a mug. If you're going to be doing more than one piece, you're going to want that. And how do you want to set the scene of your performance within your space? Remembering that you are performing from the very second your name is called, before you even get to the space itself. As soon as attention is drawn to you, you are performing. Consider the space as you do this. How will you get up to the stage? How will you get back to your seat in the way that is least disruptive? Where will your audience be while you are performing? Are they just in front of you in a standard performance lecture? Are they also on your sides? Okay, now we have to attention elsewhere. Is this a fire circle where the audience is everywhere and you may be acoustically competing with other speakers who are off to the side? Are there any royals behind you or populace in front, such as at court? Do you have a patron or a particular person who has asked you to perform? And who do they want you to address or entertain? If it's a fire circle, where is the wind coming from? And is there smoke? Are you on a stage with the audience below you? Are you in a pit with the audience up above you? Is this a formal space or is this an informal space? Will there be royals present? Do you know where they'll be sitting? And would their presence affect how you choose to perform? Note, if the answer is court, the answer is yes, and you're going to want to speak with the herald in charge or the chamberlain about any limitations or preferences on your performance from the royal whim, such as at feast. If this is a royal presence at a bardic circle, there is a much less chance that you're going to need to pay attention to this. So yes. Are you in your performance the center of that moment? Or are you mostly background entertainment, like at a feast? Does the space come with its own items that you either have to navigate around or might potentially use in your performance? If so, you're gonna wanna get permission. Don't use anything without permission. And I am gonna note, since we do a lot of our events in churches, in general, the stuff on the altar, the stuff in the space where like people go to listen to the head of the church, don't talk about that stuff. Just don't ask about that stuff. That stuff's off limits. Just, yeah, no. If you are asking about other items that might be props, listen very carefully to the event staff on what site limitations are, and just, if in doubt, don't mess with it. This is not a space to be asking for forgiveness instead of permission. And I find it very useful to think through doing my piece in any number of these scenarios in advance. How am I going to do ego dolven with just being able to walk back and forth? How am I going to do ego dolven if I need to do it in the round, if my audience is all around me? How am I going to do ego dolven if there's a royal court going on and I am the entertainment for that court? So this way, the day of the performance, I am much more fluid and I am able to move from one to the other pretty easily. I happen to be someone who deals with pre-performance jitters a lot. Those jitters are coming out one way or another, either by stimming in a distracting way or in movement in the space. I know I have to work movement into my performance as an adaptation so I can deal with this. Things to keep in mind. Do we have any questions on the space in general at this time? Okay. Look to the piece. So now that we've considered the items that we have on hand and the spaces we are performing in, let's consider the individual pieces themselves. Some of you might actually be surprised that I'm not starting with the piece. But props and spaces can be used for multiple pieces. So I like to consider them in the abstract before I layer on an individual piece. So I have building blocks that I can then move around conceptually and play with to fit my particular scenario. I may not know the exact location and layout available in advance, but with these building blocks and these kind of general scenarios, I can consider the multiple combinations and prepare for flexibility. The two big parts of this that I consider are characterization and emotional emphasis. So think about your piece. Pick up a piece in your mind. Later on, we will potentially, if we have time, be doing an exercise where you name a piece and consider your characters or emotions within it. So just kind of get that in the back of your mind right now. Maybe you can embody one or another of these concepts, your characters or your emotions, using your props. Are there multiple characters or voices in the piece? Start by establishing. So if you're going to use your prop to, per se, be a character, start by establishing the item or the movement related to the character in question. It's especially powerful if you can combine an item and a movement together. You don't have to directly say, this plush toy is an annoying cat named Bartholomew. Or, when I stand like this, I am embodying Prince Peter the Pompous. Especially in a tight, compact work or like a song or a poem, you're not going to have the time for this. Your audience is, for the most part, a smart group of individuals, and they can, for the most part, intuit. So, if I am doing this kind of emotion, rocking my body and my arms like I've got a baby in them, you don't need to actually say, my arms are cradling a baby, to get the general idea of having a baby in my arms across. The motion is generally understood in our collective cultural understanding to imply baby. If you don't have an actual physical item here, do be certain that the motions that you make are generally relevant within the culture that you're in. In general, if you have seen it used in a stereotyped manner, in a sitcom, in a game of charades, it's probably okay to assume it's widely enough known. And if you aren't certain, talk to a few people first. Try and get a mix of both neurodivergent and neurotypical if you really want to be certain. If you have a physical item, like a toy for a spoken piece, it can help to address it by name. Isn't that right, Bartholomew? Give it an easy label that the audience can add to it. Once you've established a particular movement or item as related to a character, you can talk to it. Hi, Bartholomew, are you a menace to society? Yes, he is. You can move it around or otherwise interact with it, and your audience will buy into this as long as the initial introduction makes sense to them and your movements remain consistent and understandable in your following interactions. So in our baby example, once we have established the precedent of this baby being in our arms, we can pick it up, we can bounce it around, we can move it from place to place, we can flail it over our heads. I mean, I don't know why you would want to, it's a baby, but still, even though it doesn't actually exist, once your audience understands that motion, you can interact with them as if the thing did exist, as long as you remain consistent. If Prince Peter the Pompous is introduced facing one way with a particular stance and a particular voice, and the character is trading back and forth with another, then it's a good idea to, if possible, at least start each interaction of Prince Peter the Pompous facing the same way and with the same intonation of voice to reestablish the character before moving on into other actions that Prince Peter is doing. Any questions on characterization with your props as a general concept? Do we have any questions from the Zoom, by the way?
None from the Zoom yet.
Excellent. I have to admit, kind of sometimes forgetting about their Sorry, Zoom. Emotions. What are the emotions in the piece? We're not just thinking surface level, happy, sad, angry kind of things, but what are the $12 words that you can find while looking deep into a thesaurus? Wistful, morose, jubilant, the specific words. I find it very helpful to consider a word cloud of detailed emotion words for me to consider while related to the piece. Going to an online thesaurus is fantastic for this as a modern option. Or for those of you who don't use such tools, just pick up a normal thesaurus and read through it like you would. I consider, so once I've identified the emotions in my piece, I consider if I want to actively accentuate them as a third-party thing that my character is experiencing, or use my movements and my props to physically embody them myself. So is Bartholomew the Menace acting sad and morose that he was dissuaded from his latest trick? Or am I acting sad and morose on Bartholomew the Menace's behalf? That sort of is my item embodying it, or am I embodying it? Go back to your list of how you can move your items and how you can use your space, and consider your emotions word cloud to pair them together with your characters. Introspective emotions take smaller and slower movements. Private pain, private joy, a character considering what to do next, being wistful, remembering things. More energetic emotions take larger and faster movements, also louder, being furious or jubilant. You don't need to or want to inhabit every single emotion into the piece. That is oftentimes too chaotic or too distracting. Instead, pick one major emotion for each section of your piece and focus on highlighting that key one for the section. And one final thing I do want to address for the piece itself is when to move and the beat. Many pieces, particularly your poems and your songs, have a strong rhythm or beat to them. And if you have any prior performance experience, especially like a 101 level experience, you may have been told that you shouldn't sway back and forth to the beat in a performance because it is distracting. And this is true to a point. Semi-aimless swaying is distracting, the type that I honestly kind of have been doing for a good portion of this teaching today. But on the other hand, Using your body to accentuate the beat is a very different manner, and it can be done as an emphatic. Again, you want to do it in a practiced and intentional manner. In general, if you're looking to emphasize an emotion or action, you want to do it with the beat so that it ends as the beat ends. The crisper you can make that, the more effective is the motion. So, as an extreme example, emphasizing every syllable by clapping. Very attention grabbing. If you aren't doing your actions so much to emphasize your words, but more to enact or set the scene, wandering through the city, it doesn't need to follow the beat quite so closely. It's still a good idea to be aware of the beat and to be aware that you might be falling into a aimless swaying, but again, it doesn't have to be quite as close. Do we have any questions on preparing the piece in a general sense at this time, or the emotional aspects? Okay. Look to the people. Other performers or your audience, either way. Here's a little secret for you. People can be props, and really fun props. People can be moved around and moved with. But before we get into that, a giant important caveat here, very emphatic at the top. If you are going to touch anyone in any way or get within their bubble, you need their consent. You need their explicit permission before you get in their space. In the case of other performers, discuss this in more in depth in advance of your performance. It doesn't need to be a big, serious, okay, now we are going to have a consent checklist conversation. But it's things like, hey, so in this piece about a cat, I'd really love it if I could, pet your hair, or if you act like a cat a little bit, if I get in your space as a cat and like pretend to pet you. Is that okay? Casual conversation is okay, just have the conversation. Also, touch base the day of to make certain that they're still on board with it within the specifics of their body in that day. Especially if you know that they're a person who lives with pain issues. There's some days I can't do things. There's just some days I can't. But a lot of days I can. And people that you work with more frequently, you may be able to develop more blanket consent rules with, so you may not need to discuss this for each individual piece. So for example, Magister Hilla over there, they can basically come up and do anything with me in a performance, and I'm just gonna yes and it. For those of you who may not be aware, yes and is an improv concept where you just go with the flow. You're not gonna stop and say no unless it's a big consent violation for you. You're just going to, it's like, oh yeah, so there's a purple space monkey that's coming to, oh yes and. Yes, and the purple space monkey is clearly looking to establish a garden on Earth. You keep going with it. However, Hilla and I have been performing together for many years at this point, and we have a lot of experience with each other's comfort levels, pain points, and things that might be of challenge. So while we may not have a conversation each and every single performance, we have had bucket conversations throughout the scope of those years. If you're looking to involve people from the audience, ask for volunteers. You don't have to give away the entire action, but if you can describe the contact in a more amorphous way, it's a good idea. I'm looking to give someone a high five. I need a volunteer for a hug. If you can't think of a way to make that flow naturally within the space of the performance itself and while introducing your piece, or if there's tight time constraints, think about getting a volunteer in advance, a friend in advance that you can plant in the audience so that when you say, I'm looking for a volunteer and their hand goes up, you've already had that conversation and you can just pick your plant out of the audience. It's not cheating. It really isn't cheating. Yeah. Again, don't touch people without talking about it, and if they seem hesitant, don't push them into it. Really don't, just don't. It's not a good idea. And this isn't just for the volunteer, by the way. This is also for you. You don't want something unexpected to be happening on your stage, if at all possible. This is your stage. You are in control. You want to know what's going on. Don't ever look behind you. But you want to know what's... you want to have an idea of what's about to happen. And if your volunteer isn't on board with this, if they don't know what's about to happen, they can mess up your entire piece without even knowing it. So it's not just for their sake, it's a selfish reason as well. So, yes. Who's on board? Yes. Oh yes, and also, like, if they don't know what's going to happen, even just beyond messing up with timing, you could physically get hurt as well, especially if you're working in close proximity. Just ask them first. Ask them first. As an example of this, there's a piece I do where Hilla plays as my pet cat. Before we did that piece for the very first time, we did casually, in the car, talk through some of the different ways that a cat and a human can interact. We made certain that we were okay with that as the piece, and I do end up, usually by the end of the piece, she's right here, and I'm hugging her, and I'm petting her, and she's my little kitty.
Her belt tastes terrible.
Yes, yes, usually this belt ends up in their mouth. Yeah.
That's good as a surprise. Good to know.
Yes. However, you don't need to touch someone to interact with them. Newsflash. You don't need to interact with humans by touching them all the time. We are interacting right now. And you can definitely bring more into the piece without necessarily relying on having another specific person in this kind of a manner. These are things that you can practice on your own, even if you don't have an audience. So number one, you do not want to ignore your audience as a bard, as a performer, as someone who is speaking in front of a group, with a few very specific musical exceptions. We are not a concert hall performance. In a concert hall performance, you're expecting more of a disconnect between the players, who are very intently focused on their work in front of them, and your audience. We are not that. The connection between the performer and the audience is, I believe, the answer to the age-old question of what makes bardic bardic. It is what is different from other things. The audience is there, they're not going away, and I promise they are not that scary. They are there to have an entertaining time, and they want that entertaining time to be to the benefit of the person standing in front of them, unless they're a jerk, and we don't like jerks. And there are extremely few jerks. They want you to succeed. A little tip for those of you who find eye contact difficult. Look at the spot just behind their head, or just to the side of their ear. Most of the time, when you're at the distance for performance length, people can't tell the difference. They really can't. And as an example of this, I've been looking out at you guys. I'm bad with eye contact. Have any of you guys been able to tell that I have not actually looked any of you in the face this entire performance? Yeah. Well, you do, but you know my tricks. For those of you who are attending on Zoom, I have both my Laurel and my former belt sister, who is now a Laurel in their own right, in the room, as well as my belt uncle. They know my tricks. So, one note with this. When you're performing, you can pick someone in the crowd to perform to. And this is especially useful if someone has requested a piece, if it's someone's special day, if you have a patron who has said, hey, I want to make certain that Thora really should hear this piece. I can perform to Thora's left earlobe. Yes, because again, eye contact is a problem here. But left earlobe, it's close enough. Breaking the fourth wall and giving the audience a meaningful glance, can also do a lot in the right moment. An eyebrow raise can indicate that you and the audience together know a thing that maybe, just maybe, that character over there doesn't know. We are on a thing, the narrator, the performer, and the audience, that our character in our piece is not. You see how I'm using place and movement to help connect you and me versus our character who is over there. Our character doesn't have a name. We don't have a genre, we don't have emotion. But you know that our character is over there because I am placing our character over there. Another way of interacting with our audience is to invite them to join in on your piece, especially in more informal bardic circles. If you do not want people to sing or to play instruments with you, try to mention this at the start of the piece. If you don't want them to join with you and you don't mention it, and they do happen to start, even though you don't really want them to, you can shake your head in their direction, or you can do kind of a dismissive wave gesture. And if they're at all paying attention to you, which they probably will be, they should pick up on this and stop. There are some times where they're just too caught up in the moment and they don't. You just kind of have to go with it and keep going. Those are relatively rare, but they do happen. If you do want other performers to join you, it helps to invite them to join in as part of the introduction of the piece, to give them explicit permission. But if you forget to do this, you can also signal that you would like them to join in the middle of the piece, especially if you start hearing tentative voices or instruments that you want to encourage. If someone's singing a harmony that you particularly like, just kind of doing it choir. These aren't exhaustive ways of doing this by any means, but one example is you can use kind of a come here gesture, making certain you can see this on the camera. Kind of a come here gesture, either one-handed or with both hands. If you keep it small like this, it lets them know that they're good to do it right there. If you really want to get the person involved, you can do a bigger come here gesture, and that's more of a get up here on stage you kind of gesture. That's not as, don't use that with people who are singing tentatively, that's not as much of a thing. But if it's, Hilla has suddenly come up with a new harmony to one of my pieces, and I'm like, oi, get up here, join in my performance. That's the kind of signal that you can use. Yes, if the audience is joining with you and you want them to be louder, you can hold your arm palm up, I'm going to stress here, palm up, and raise your volume. Raise your volume. Do not flip your hand and do it the other way. I'm not going to show that gesture. Palm up, raise volume. Similarly, if you would like them to be quieter, palm down and down. If you have invited, note here, very important thing to remember and to know, because it'll sneak up on you if you aren't aware of it. If you had invited the audience to sing with you, they are probably going to sing with you, especially if there's a couple of intrepid people who will start out singing. If your piece has a beat and the audience has been invited to sing with you, there is very likely that they are going to start clapping with the beat. And there's a very, very strong chance that if that beat is a strong beat, that they are going to push it faster, even though they can't think that they are doing it. Be aware of this and watch for it. You can try a gesture stepping back and going down to try to slow them down. It's 50-50 whether this is going to work in my experience. It doesn't always work. When you're in this moment, you have to make the decision if you're going to go with it, if you think you can keep up with this new tempo. Keep in mind that if you do, there is a good chance that you're going to push the new tempo faster. And you're going to get stuck at a point where you're talking a million miles a minute. Or if you're going to try to fight your audience and hold to the tempo, it will break the piece a little bit. Your audience is gonna, you'll hear the stutter clap thing going on. It's disconcerting. If you're gonna do this, you need to be strong in it to make certain that your audience knows that this is our tempo, we're holding this line. Only you can decide on this. Think about it in advance if you have one of these kind of pieces, because it might show up. If you need your audience to stop in a planned way, one way of doing this is holding your arm out to the side, palm down, and then as you approach your stopping point, you can rotate your hand and your wrist and close your hand. Again, this is just one example. Other performers may have others, but this is a relatively common one. So again, hand out to the side and close. You can do this with either hand, but this hand is holding a book, so I'm not going to do that right now. So yes, do you have anything you would like me to clarify about using the people in your audience before we go on to our last section? I know. I've got 5 minutes.
Tempo question.
Yes.
If you're worried about the audience trying to speed things up, can you set the tempo? Use your
You
staff
can
to
try. It
Okay.
depends on how big and how forceful your audience is. If your audience is big enough and you are not strong enough in your own control of the beat, and especially if you're looking at an unamplified situation, if the acoustics aren't necessarily strongly in your favor, you might not be able to control it. And unfortunately, I haven't found a couth way of saying, hey, please don't speed up the beat on me. Because most of the time the audience doesn't realize what they are doing. They are just going with the beat that everyone else is. Yeah. Okay, so our last section, we're not gonna have time for our exercises at the end, but that's fine. I'll tell you what you can do with your exercises. Final piece is look to yourself. These are not specifically movement or prop related, but just general performance things that will affect your movement and your prop usage. Know yourself and what you are going to be able to do. Feel free to try new things, especially if the event is lending itself to that. Bardic Madness and Bardic Circles are a fantastic space to try out your new and untested pieces. High Court before their majesties might not be the best place to break out the absolute newest and least practiced piece unless it's by royal request, or if you have really, really prepped it. Do you know where your props are? It's 10 p.m. Do you know where your props are? Yeah, I'm old. Are they ready for you to go? Do you need to repair any of them? Do you need to fix any of them? Do you need to paint anything? Do that in advance of your performance. If you need to eat before you perform, eat before you perform. Fainting from a lack of food causes paperwork, and we do not like paperwork. We also don't like seeing our friends get hurt. Don't lock your knees while you're performing in a similar manner, because if you do that, you will pass out. Ask me how I know. Hydrate before you perform. Refill your mug if you're going to be doing more than one piece in your set, and drink between your pieces as needed. You cannot sing if your voice is cracked from not having water. Try to pee before you perform, if at all possible. Same rules as road trip. Pee before you get in the car. Pee before you get on performance. It is amazing how distracting a bladder is. It really, really is. Do you need pain meds? If so, please take the pain meds. If part of your body is bothering you that day, it will affect your performance. And if so, you might want to consider your alternatives. Is it better for you to perform sitting that day? Or is standing still fine? Is standing fine but not walking? You notice I'm not moving a ton once I put my staff down, because right now I can do that. Walking, not necessarily as much. If an action hurts, don't do it. If an action hurts, don't do it. It might help to prep a few different variants of the same action for different pain levels, if that is a thing that affects you. I know that there are some things that I can only do earlier in the day. And there are some things that you will not see me trying to do this late in the day unless their royal majesties are standing right there and we have had a conversation in advance about me needing to do that. Or if I'm on the court list and I know this is happening. I can guarantee you that the general audience isn't paying close enough attention to how this individual performance differs from any performance that came before it. They're really only seeing the performance in front of them. So if you need to alter something for your capabilities on the day of, please do it. Do what you can to make certain you've done warm-ups and breathing exercises. Stretch if you're going to be doing anything acrobatic in your piece. How's your guard handling today? Is it binding or stabbing you somewhere that is going to distract you? Or is it going to prevent you from breathing deep from your diaphragm? Or from doing any of your motions? Can you do all the things in your garb? If yes, you want to be aware of this and adjust accordingly. If you have time in advance, try to find garb that lets you breathe from your diaphragm and do all the motions. Get yourself mentally in the moment. Imagine yourself in the space if you think it might help you. And one of the things that really helps me is to mentally fill the space with my supporters before I start. And it also helps me a lot to walk through the performance, to literally imagine myself doing every single step of the performance in this imaginary space filled with my imaginary supporters, to really help me get in the moment. You've got this. Bardic is a safe community. Events like Bardic Madness and Bardic Circles are wonderful spaces to add new things. And when you're ready, the larger stages are going to be ready for you as well. So, that is the lecture portion of my class. We are at the hour, so we will not have time for the exercises today, but I told you all to consider a piece that you have or that you know of that has emotions and characters in it. I want you to try to identify some of the things I talked about, and to try and think of how you might embody them or how you might move in them. Also, think of the events that you like to go to and try to imagine the spaces that they have for performance there. Try to imagine yourself standing in those spaces and how you might adjust your performance to those spaces. Little exercises that, yeah, if I had time, we'd be doing here today, but we don't. Luckily, I'm the next class also, so.
Thank you.